We have set up an economic system that's based on scarcity and competition.
So that everybody is being told you have to maximize production, you have to add as much value as possible to what you do produce, and then you have to cut costs. That's what they're all being told. That is the great imperative.
If everybody lived like we did in the UK, we would need 3 planets worth of resources to support that lifestyle. We know we don't have 3 planets worth of resources, but at the same time we are selling that consumption model across the world, in all of these evolving and developing economies are also sort of following the same trajectories.
We all have this mindset that everything is allowed and that we don't have to pay for the consequences.
Politicians spent the last 30 years doing this to big business, saying, you know, what do you want? We'll do it. And we'll sell it to the electorate every 4 years, but we'll do what you want because you are God, you are king, you are the market.
The market decides whether or not we'll have a health system. The market decides whether or not there'll be a school near where our children need to go. The market decides whether we'll have a job. The market decides or doesn't decide, you know, whether or not we'll have a future. The market decides whether or not we should care for the environment.
When they first investigated the defaulting subprime mortgages in the States, and they were looking down the list, and one of the first names they came to was Mickey Mouse. And I think, you know, when Mickey Mouse can take a mortgage out, because this is done by a computer, it doesn't check, it doesn't care what the names are, then you realise the financial system is in trouble.
It should be possible, it is possible, it's technically possible, to feed everybody in the world who is ever likely to be born, not just now, but ever likely to be born, to the very, very highest standards. So it's pretty grotesque. What that means is you've got 1/3 of humanity are very, very badly served by the present system.
Blaming the bankers, blaming the banks, blaming the politicians will not get us very far.
Capitalism needs an update. Or in other words, capitalism needs a new operating system.
I think the idea is to look deeper at the financial system, at the money system.
One day I discovered something really simple and very, very influential, and that's the way our money system operates. And it operates in stark contrast to everything in nature.
A friend of mine, a Mexican economist, says that when he first started studying economics, he felt as if he were entering a Hindu temple. You know, they had many deities, which are many small gods on many altars, which have not much to do with each other. And then when you get to the central altar, where you expect to learn about money, it's empty.
You could say the present money system has one goal, that is making more money out of money. And so all other goals, whether they're social or cultural or ecological, have a very hard time getting sufficient finance.
I don't think the discussion is going deep enough as to how the money is actually being created and how this leads to the growth imperative and to the instability and to the growing difference between the rich and the poor.
The interest system is really what is at the heart, basically, of all the major financial crises we have had over the last few thousand years, especially over the last 100 years, and especially today. The example is very well known, usually, but you need to remember it. 1 penny, 1 cent invested at the birth of Jesus Christ by his father Joseph. Where if Jesus had come back in the year 2000 and could have gone to the same bank and got this 1 cent with 5% interest throughout history, which is the average interest paid throughout history, the bank would have had to give him in the year 2000 over 300 billion balls of gold of the weight of the earth at the price of gold in this year. If the 5% had been added onto an account without giving interest on interest, so if it had been only simple interest accrued, in the same time span, the 1 cent would have accrued only €1.01. 5% over 2,000 years. The problem we have at the moment is that the real growth of the economy also stops at maybe not an optimal level, but there is a time when everybody has enough refrigerators, has enough consumer goods, and food and so on also is not infinitely expandable. And the growth in the money system keeps on going and demanding the interest, because you don't invest unless you make at least the interest. So this is why our economies have to follow an exponential growth path and cannot stop where they actually want to stop, when most of the needs are satisfied. This explains really why, for instance, Muhammad in Islam, simple interest is not the problem, he says, but interest on interest, compound interest, that is usury. And that was forbidden by all the major religions in the world, because these religious leaders knew that it was the dynamite in any community.
What we see from the credit crunches is an economic system or a financial system that had assumptions of debt in it and its ability to pay back and grow. We see those exact same assumptions based on the accumulation of what we call ecological debts, that we are drawing down more natural resources than can be regenerated.
The real danger is politicians will see what they keep talking about is how do we get back to business as usual? How do we get back to the old growth rate?
We want to replace that system with something far more viable, something which has respect for the limits, the finite limits of the earth, the finite resources of the earth, and the finite resources, if you like, of humanity.
Growth is something that has become a superstition amongst economists, in the sense that everything is focused on growth. If we don't have growth, we cannot have prosperity, we cannot have abundance, we cannot have creativity. And of course that's completely wrong, because in the natural world you've got all those, you've got abundance, creativity, all the time, with no growth.
What we have not understood is that we design our money systems, and like you design a house for different purposes, or a car for different purposes, or, I don't know, clothes for different purposes, you can also design money systems for different purposes.
We have to start to ensure that our financial systems are connected to the physical reality within which they operate. How do we support 6 to 9 billion people? How do we ensure that they have a good quality of life?
Everybody in the world having $1,000 a year or $3 a day, which is probably the minimum for viable life. When you do the sums, it's very simple arithmetic. You actually calculate that we need 15 planets to get us there. So the idea we can just grow our way out of poverty, we just can't. Each of us have an equal share of planetary resources, and so those using more than their fair share, whether it's atmosphere or water or fish or whatever it is, pay a rental to those using less. And that mechanism, politically and very, very difficult, would be the best redistribution mechanism you can imagine on this planet.
There has never been a better time, never, to actually jiu-jitsu the instability we've got at the moment towards our end goals.
We're seeing the crash of an old system and hopefully the birth of something much better.
Out of this crisis can come a much more environmental future. But the thing is, it's got to be grabbed fast.
If we stay in the moment, right now, and get on with it, and focus our energies on the transformation, that's it. Not to be worried about time, because we know what we have to do.
We need to ensure that we understand how this planet works. We need to ensure that we are living on it so that we are able to maintain the conditions for life, and that everything else is secondary to those two priorities.
'tis not the lark you hear calling, 'tis a seabird through the night sky falling. 'Tis not the morn that's duly forming. Oh, lie back down, down, down in the warm sheets. Come lie down.